There is no spoon.
Hello and welcome to the SpoonieVR podcast. From increasing physical activity to alleviating social isolation, virtual reality can be a truly therapeutic tool for the chronically ill, disabled, or anyone who finds themselves homebound for any number of reasons. My name is Sunny, but my handle pretty much everywhere online and in VR is Insomnia Doodles, and I'm the creator of the SpoonieVR blog, which features and reviews virtual reality games, experiences, and services from a Spoonie's perspective. If you're unfamiliar with the term Spoonie, go back and listen to the first episode for a quick explanation. One quick note before I get to this podcast episode, I do apologize. I didn't realize until after the interview, but the gain for my microphone was turned all the way up. Rookie mistake, I know, but I'm no professional. But anyway, my audio quality is not as good as it usually is, and I'm a little bit more peaky than our guest, so I apologize. Hopefully that's not too bad. It didn't seem like a deal breaker to me, so I decided to keep the interview and publish it anyway. I edited it as much as I could, but yeah, the audio quality is not to my own standards, so I apologize for that. Hopefully you guys can bear with me. Thanks so much. On this episode, I had the awesome opportunity to interview PhD student Lucy Jang from Cornell University. She and her teammates are researching how folks with invisible disabilities interact with social VR experiences. This is a really great conversation, and the research opportunity is open and available for you to apply to if you're interested. There is compensation. She's made it very clear that folks at Cornell are aware of the fact that folks in the disability sphere tend to be kind of taken advantage of when it comes to research. So this is not something they're expecting you to do for free. You will get paid for it, and it seems like a whole lot of fun, and also seems like something that's going to help a lot of folks in VR get more accessibility and more representation. Also, stick around after the interview for some news and updates regarding SpoonieVR, what we're working on, and what's happening with the support group since all space is closing down. Thanks for listening, and without further ado, here's that interview. Let's go ahead and just get things started with a little bit of an introduction. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what your connection is to virtual reality?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Lucy. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a first-year PhD student at Cornell University. And my connection to virtual reality, so to be honest, I'm a little bit prone to motion sickness, so I don't use VR too much personally, but I think there's so much potential for VR, AR, XR collectively to have a positive impact on society. And genuinely, the pandemic has shown us that we don't have to be co-located to connect or socialize or work. So really, there's so many opportunities. I think it's really important for us to design for a positive future where virtual reality is helping us rather than hindering us.
That's fantastic, yeah, and I wholeheartly agree. When I first got my very first VR headset back in 2019, I actually only got it to play Beat Saber. And because I saw a lot of people playing it online, it looked like so much fun. But of course, after I got the headset and I, played around with Beat Saber, I discovered social virtual reality, which I had never even considered that concept before, but since then, it's really changed my life. I have a support group that I host in there now that meets every Sunday, and we've been doing that for the last 3 years, and it's such an important part of my life now. I can't imagine life without social VR anymore. So I wholeheartedly agree that connection is so important, and it's so helpful, especially, you mentioned XR, all of AR, VR combined, all of these different ways to connect together in these virtual platforms really helps folks, especially in the disability community who have a hard time getting out of the house, really helps them to connect. And that brings us to your research at Cornell University. So this is very exciting. I'm a big nerd when it comes to research and stuff like this, so I'm very excited to learn more. Lucy and I actually met because she had reached out to me via email. I guess you must have found the SpoonieVR website and decided to check it out. And she reached out and asked if our community might be interested in getting involved in this research study, which we're going to talk about a bit more. So why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about Cornell University and that research?
Yeah, awesome. So I'm part of the Enhancing Ability Lab at Cornell, which is led by Dr. Shiri Azenkot. And our lab works on studying accessibility, and many of our projects actually focus on AR and VR accessibility in particular. So for example, like some of my lab mates are working on designing accessible VR experiences for blind and low vision VR users. Another study that I'm working on right now is to better understand the preferences of blind and low vision people when it comes to immersive 360-degree video descriptions, which I think is really cool. And then in addition to our work on social VR and AR, our lab also works on projects that have to do with information access for blind and low vision folks and ableist hate and harassment online. And for these projects in particular, our research lab is also collaborating with amazing people over at the Cornell Virtual Embodiment Lab, which is led by Dr. Andrea Stevenson-Wan.
That's awesome. That's so exciting, especially, I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I actually have a rare disease called septo-optic dysplasia, which caused optic nerve hypoplasia, which has left me blind in both peripherals, and I have low vision overall. So when I first got that VR headset, I didn't even know if it would really work for me with my eyesight. Luckily it did. I have no issues with it whatsoever. But with my double nystagmus that I've got, where my eyes kind of twitch at different speeds in different directions, and the bitemporal hemanopsia, which is the blindness in both peripherals, that causes some limitations in terms of, the being blind in both peripherals doesn't really affect me in VR all that much because the field of view is still fairly limited in VR. But when it comes to the double nystagmus and the eyes twitching, tools such as eye tracking software might not work for me. So researchers like yourself working on this space are actually going to contribute so much for folks like me. I'm very excited to hear that there's so much going on in that field. It's fantastic. Yeah. So this research study that you reached out to me about was specifically focused on folks with invisible disabilities and how they present themselves in VR, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So on this project, I'm working with a couple of amazing other collaborators. So I'm working with Ria, who's a PhD student in communications at Cornell, and then Keshin is a master's student in information science. And yeah, we're focusing specifically on invisible disabilities. And this is because actually there's a little bit of work in visible disability representation in VR already. Kishan previously worked on a project to understand, visible disability representation, which was super fascinating to read. Would definitely recommend reading it if you have a chance. And we thought, as invisible disabilities impact a huge group of people, we think it's really important to keep on studying this, to not only support people with invisible disabilities, but also destigmatize their experiences, because there are a lot of, unfortunately, stigmas that face people with invisible disabilities. So yeah, in our work, we aim to study and design for all disabilities, but in particular for this project, we think it's really important to see, how does disability disclosure exist in online settings, especially in VR where it's more maybe embodied and stuff like that. So we just wanted to study invisible disabilities for this project.
What's the primary goal of this research? What is it that you're hoping to achieve overall with all the work that you're doing with this?
Yeah, so the primary goal of this research is really just to make sure that disabled people aren't left out of the conversation when it comes to these technological advancements, because VR and XR, as we mentioned, has such a big impact on people, especially disabled people, when, access needs are maybe not met otherwise in in-person settings. So we really hope to just highlight the experiences of people with invisible disabilities, especially regarding disability disclosure, as we've already mentioned. And we really hope that our project can in the future, better guide developers and companies in creating more accessible and more representative social VR systems and platforms so that people can feel like themselves and they can really feel represented when they're, in these social settings, acting as, in their skin.
Right, exactly. That's so important. Thank you so much for your hard work on that. This is really great. Actually, one thing that I wish that I had right now in VR, representation-wise, is a zebra print outfit, because February right now is Rare Disease Month, and the last day of February is Rare Disease Day, and that's as somebody with a rare disease, this is something that's really important to me, and I always make a big deal out of it every year. I have charity events on my Twitch channel, and I post a bunch of videos and help raise awareness a lot during the month of February, and the rare disease mascot is the zebra, from that old adage, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, that's taught to medical students to encourage them to look for the most common diagnosis rather than, a rare disease diagnosis, which, for the most part makes sense in most cases, but tends to have the unintentional consequence of causing folks who have a rare disease to take a lot longer to get the correct diagnosis and the treatments they need. So we adopted the zebra as our mascot, and a lot of us like to wear zebra print stuff throughout the month of February, and gosh darn it, I just can't find any zebra print anywhere, like on Ready Player Me or any other, avatar representation services out there. So maybe your research will kind of encourage that kind of fashion sense too. That would be kind of cool. Yeah. Or even like some Spoonie gear. Be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. Like, I think a lot of people haven't just thought about all the possibilities that should be out there yet. They just kind of think about what is the quote unquote standard user, but there is no standard user. Everyone kind of has their unique style, their unique experiences and lives, and it's really important to, understand all of that instead of just focusing specifically on like this perceived general user. Right.
No, absolutely. That's, again, I sound like a broken record, but I'm so glad that there are people like you working on this. That's great. All right, so back to that research study. Let's talk a little bit about how folks can get involved with this, because this is an open research study folks can apply to. So who should apply to be included in this study?
Yes, so anybody who identifies as having an invisible disability and has also used social VR before, you can totally apply to be in our study. We have a Qualtrics form that basically helps us recruit and make sure that you have an invisible disability and have social VR experience. As soon as you fill that out, we can get back to you and kind of let you know what the future steps are.
So what can participants expect to experience during that interview?
Yeah, so during the interview, it'll be about an hour long, and we'll basically be asking you, some questions about your lived experience as someone with an invisible disability, your experiences on social VR, and there's also going to be a fun activity where you can basically brainstorm, design, kind of just hack together your favorite representation or your ideal representation, just something that you think you'd really want yourself to have your avatar as. You can take that time to show us and really explain yourself, like why would you want to do it this way and what kinds of things do you think would be really awesome to include.
That sounds like a blast, honestly. I mean, even though it already sounds like a really good time, are you offering any kind of incentives or anything to participants?
Yes, definitely. We think it's really important that all participants, especially disabled people who are often, unfortunately, really exploited and taken advantage of in these studies, it's really important to offer compensation. So yes, the incentive is $20 for the hour-long interview. So we just really believe that it's important to compensate people.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. That's great. $20, I'll take it. All right, so I'm sold. Where can I go to sign up for this?
Yeah, so you can sign up. We actually have a link, and maybe I can give it to you to attach to the podcast listing or something.
Oh, absolutely. Like that. Yeah, it'll be in the episode description, so you guys can find that real easy there. So when do you anticipate that the study will begin?
Yeah, so the study will begin probably in a couple of weeks. We're still waiting on some final recruitment things. We want to make sure that we're recruiting as many different perspectives as possible. And, school is always busy, so we're just trying to make sure that we also have time in our schedules to set aside these times for the interviews. But I think, in the next week or two, we'll definitely get started.
Oh, awesome. Sweet. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really excited. I signed up already. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. I'm really looking forward to this. I think this research is really important, and I'm just so passionate about this. I'm excited to get involved. You could have gotten me on board without the $20 incentive, but it still helps, so I'll take that. So we've discussed this research opportunity that you reached out to me about, but are there any other research opportunities that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So our lab, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is working on a very wide variety of projects related to VR, AR, but also generally accessibility and technology. So for other research opportunities, there's definitely a couple of other ones. So as I mentioned before, our lab focuses on VR and AR accessibility, but also generally accessibility and technology and online experiences of disabled people and stuff like that. So if there's ever another VR project, we'll be sure to reach out to you again. If there's anything that you or anybody in the SpoonieVR community would be interested in, we'll be sure to let you know. And you can also keep up with us on Twitter. I guess some of us in the lab have Twitter accounts where we do some open calls for recruitment. But I think we'll be working on creating a more centralized place where people can find our studies in the future.
That would be really helpful, yeah, and I would absolutely stalk that page because, like I mentioned before, big nerd here. All right. I think that pretty much covers everything related to that research, but I've got a few extra questions just for fun, so if you don't mind.
Good, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so where do you see the future of VR and XR in the metaverse?
Yeah. So that's a good question. To be honest, like as someone who personally doesn't engage with VR and XR due to like my motion sickness, I feel like one thing that I would really like to be in the future is, like more adjustments for that so that people who are prone to motion sickness can either have, better adjustments for that in the platform or also like maybe accounting for that when you're designing like experiences. So like accounting for people maybe being away from the headset instead of kind of expecting people to be on all the time. But about the future of the VR XR metaverse idea as a whole, I think there's definitely a couple of years until it maybe reaches maturity and reaches the mainstream. But it is really important that even right now, before it's not necessarily like mainstream in everybody's house, in everybody's pocket, like the phone, to consider, everyone's perspective. So people with disabilities, people of different races, to make sure that if there's like any, I don't know, it's detection or something, it's accurately detecting people with different skin tones. Like as you mentioned earlier, like sight, field of view, making sure that that's also not exclusive to people, so that if you have no vision in your periphery or maybe no vision in like your central vision, there's still different ways to deal with that and interact with the system in an equitable way. Something that kind of strikes me in like my 360 video description project is kind of this understanding that, people also want to have this autonomy when they're moving around these virtual reality spaces. And I think that's something that's kind of important that has been lost on us with social media, unfortunately. A lot of people like feel like they have autonomy, but like you realize you've been staring at your phone for 3 hours, nonstop scrolling, kind of doom scrolling. So kind of making sure that it's not overly addictive, I think is something that also needs to be taken into account for the metaverse. But really, I think it will have a massive impact on our future, no matter what. I just think like it's so important that we're studying it now and making sure that it's not only including everyone, but also including everyone in a good way that's like healthy and supports positive growth instead of, kind of negative hindrances and harms in our society.
Yeah, no, I think that is an extremely great point. And it actually is kind of topical to me right now because I'm currently reading a book called The Chaos Machine by Max Fisher. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. But it's it's basically about how social media got people addicted and then radicalized them. And it's really fascinating, the social psychology behind that. And that's a really good point that I honestly hadn't thought too much about as the metaverse grows. That really could be a serious risk here, especially considering the fact that, one of the leading companies supporting the growth of the metaverse has a really bad track record with that. So, that's an excellent point. And again, broken record, I'm glad that we've got folks like you working on that behind the scenes, because that's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on. Yeah, this has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about your research and chat a little bit about the metaverse with me. I think that's everything that we've got. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we sign off?
I just wanted to say, thank you also for this opportunity, Sunny. Really, really appreciate it. I also wanted to say big shout out to my collaborators, Ria and Keshin. We're all equally leading this project. It's not like I'm the one person who's like the point person or whatever. Like we're all definitely equally contributing. So I want to make sure that they get the attention and, respect that they deserve for this work. And then also like all the other people who are in the Enhancing Ability Lab and the Virtual Embodiment Lab, like everyone who's on here or in here is doing really amazing stuff. So be sure to check them out as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you again so much for this opportunity. I'm not a podcaster, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, thank you. Like I told you before we started recording here, I'm definitely not a professional. So the imposter syndrome is very strong, but I had a great conversation with you, and I think that this is going to be really valuable for a lot of folks. So thank you for coming on and joining me, and I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
You're a professional to me.
Thanks again to Lucy for agreeing to come on the podcast and discuss that important research. I want to take a moment to introduce you all to Lucy's colleagues, Ria and Keshin, who are equally contributing to this research. Ria identifies as a Spoonie, and they included this message to be shared on the podcast. As someone who manages a chronic illness, I came to Cornell specifically to contribute research that would benefit people who manage invisible disabilities, and this project was a first step in that direction. I feel very fortunate that we could combine my goal of contributing work on invisible disabilities, Keshin's interest in avatar representation of disability, and Lucy's diverse background in accessibility research into this project. Thank you, Ria. Keshin is a master's student in information science at Cornell. They included this message for the podcast. My research interest lies in the intersection of accessibility and VR. I'm currently studying disability representation, interaction dynamics, and disability harassment in social VR. As Lucy mentioned, I used to study visible disability representation on avatars. By the way, thanks Lucy for the hype. I noticed that the invisibility of disability could potentially be a significant factor that influenced people's disclosing decisions and strategies, and we should definitely include different types of invisible disabilities in the research group. We are excited to have you and other fellow Spoonies join the study to share your thoughts. Thank you, Keshin and Rhea. I really appreciate the hard work all three of you are doing to improve the visibility and representation in social VR for folks living with disabilities, visible or otherwise. And thank you again for sharing this research opportunity with the SpoonieVR community. Speaking of that community, I've got a bit of sad news for a lot of you folks. Unfortunately, a lot of you are already aware of the fact that AltSpace is closing down officially on March 10th. AltSpace is the platform that the VR Spoonies support group has been meeting on every Sunday for the last 3 years since we first got our start there, and as a result, we're going to have to find a new home. Luckily, we have decided that Spatial.io looks like a great place to move to. We chose Spatial because it's a platform where you can access it from multiple different devices, from VR to your phone to your tablet, computer. You can log in directly through your browser without having to download any sort of desktop application. It's really smooth, seems really great, and it looks like it's going to be a decent replacement for AltSpace. So to help folks move over to this new platform as smoothly as possible, we're going to start having meetings on Spatial every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, along with our usual meetups over on AltSpace, which is, on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll continue to meet on AltSpace at the usual time until they close, and then once they do close down, we'll end the Thursday meetups on Spatial and start meeting on Spatial at the Sunday time frame. So keep an eye out for that. I'll keep you guys posted in the Discord, on Facebook, in our messenger chats, all that fun stuff. You can get access to those by going to SpoonieVR.com/support and clicking on the buttons to join whichever service you prefer. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. I also want to give a quick shout out to the developers of Forever Games, which has created Forever Bowl, Forever Cornhole, Forever Pool, and Forever Darts. I had reached out to them about doing an interview looking into the accessibility features they have involved in these games. I had actually spoken with Mike Doom, one of the original creators, before, years ago, when I originally wanted to interview him to talk about Forever Bowl and their accessibility options at the time. Unfortunately, life got busy and I wasn't able to work on that interview at the time. Of course, a lot of time has passed since then, and they've developed these other games. So now that I've got more time and energy again, I decided to reach back out and ask them if they would be interested in doing an interview talking about the accessibility features in all of their games overall in just one review altogether. And when I had reached out to them, I hadn't asked for any sort of freebies or anything like that. I was trying to secure an interview of some kind. And they offered to give me the games that I don't have yet for free. They sent me game codes for those games so that I can review them. And they said they'd be happy to give me a written response to questions that I send them after I've had the chance to test out these games and check out all of their accessibility features. They're really confident that they've got a lot of great accessibility tools, and I'm excited to test them out. So I just wanted to give them a huge shout out and say thank you again for those game codes. That really helps considering the fact that I'm on a pretty limited budget being on disability. So having those games for free so that I can assess their accessibility features was an excellent gift to the whole SpoonieVR community. So I just really wanted to say thank you for that, and don't worry guys. Just because I got these games for free doesn't mean I'm going to cut them any slack. I'm going to review them just as well as I do every other game in terms of accessibility features. So keep an eye out for that. I'll let you know when that's ready, and I'm really excited. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you guys so much for listening. Stay safe out there, take care, and I'm sending spoons your way.